All right. Well, welcome everybody. It's so good to have you here. We're talking today to Dr. Ryan Beaty, who is, if I'm not mistaken, with the University of Oklahoma. Is that
I,
right?
I was with the University of Oklahoma when I conducted the study we're going to talk about today. I'm now an
Mhm.
assistant professor at the University of Tennessee.
Oh, wonderful. So you're quite close, and I should have seen the orange T on your shirt there. Well, welcome to Tennessee. Uh, Ryan, why don't you begin by just telling us a little bit about yourself and about the study that we're talking about today?
Yeah, happy to. Thanks, Jeff. So Ryan Beaty, like I said, assistant professor of organizational communication at the University of Tennessee. This study came out of a conflict course that I took in my PhD program at the University of Oklahoma.
Excellent.
It was really an interesting sort of confluence of events
Mhm.
because I have two fantastic co-authors on this paper.
Mhm.
Dr. Brian Long, who is at Pellissippi State Community College in
Mhm.
Knoxville, Tennessee, and Dr. Amy Johnson, who's at the University of Oklahoma. Dr. Johnson was my instructor for the course.
Ah,
Brian wasn't in the class, but he was a colleague, and he and I had previously kicked around ideas concerning a study of this type.
mhm.
So when I was invited to do a study on conflict of some kind during the PhD seminar, uh, this is what came out of that.
Very good. Excellent. Now, the project revisits a question that was first raised by Mueller and Honeycutt in 2010 about whether imagined interactions and private prayer have some overlap to them. Tell us about that study and what interested you about it.
Yeah, so that was a really interesting study that in 2010 Ida Mueller and Honeycutt did to try to identify similarities
Mhm.
between the functions and characteristics of imagined interactions. Imagined interactions are these organized daydreams in which an individual will play a scenario in their mind before
Mhm.
they go into it or retrospectively. Uh, and
Mhm. Mhm.
and the research that has been done over time indicates that there are 14 functions and characteristics. So this is what it looks like. This is what it does for you. So
Got
Ida
it.
Mueller and Honeycutt, who Honeycutt is the originator of imagined interactions theory. Ida Mueller and Honeycutt went to examine how private Christian prayer may or may not
Mhm.
show some of those characteristics and functions of imagined interactions.
Got it.
So, as a second career academic, first career clergy person,
Mhm.
um,
Mhm.
and a person of faith, obviously the idea of prayer caught my attention. What was also interesting to me about Ida Mueller and Honeycutt study is that they limited their sample to a very specific slice of
Sure.
evangelical Christians.
Mhm.
So, Baptists, Methodists, and non denominational Christians. And for those of us who spend a whole lot of time in the Christian space, what we know about non-denominational Christians is they're probably just disaffiliated Baptists, right? Like that's the group that we're talking about. The
Yes.
Baptists who still identify as Baptists, Baptists who don't identify as Baptists, and Methodists,
It's
right?
so
This is
true.
the group. Uh, so so they conducted their study with that group. But one of the things that they also did was they did a preemptive dialogue between the two of them. Ida Mueller being an expert in the area of Christian prayer, uh,
Mhm.
on which characteristics and functions they thought may show up and may not show up. And so
Sure.
they eliminated some of the functions and characteristics from Honeycutt's I Imagine Interaction scale. So when I came to this study thinking about what I wanted to do here, I thought, okay, so how do we build off this? And for me, it was who did they not look at, and what did they not look at?
Yeah.
So it was the who was easy. It was all the other Christians, um, as well as people who are observant Jewish worshipers.
Good.
We thought that in conversation with my other co-authors, we thought that there is some obviously because of just the Abrahamic faith connection, there may be some overlap in prayer styles and approaches between observant Jews and worshiping observant Jews and Christian people. So we thought, hey, let's include them as well because that would be a really fascinating sample piece. So we thought, hey, okay, so now we've got a different sample to see. Okay, is it more than just this slice of evangelicals? And then we wanted to see were Mueller and Honeycutt correct in thinking that these other functions and characteristics wouldn't show up?
Sure.
So what they found in their original study was that there was similarities. That many of the functions and characteristics that they examined for did show up, and so their indicators were that private Christian prayer, at least for this group of evangelical Christians, was very similar to imagined interactions in function and characteristics.
Sure.
So that led us to our study. The other thing that we wanted to do with our study was, one, we also wanted to look at whether or not the specific influence or prompting towards conflict with God, because conflict management is a function of imagined interactions.
Right.
And so if we're talking about an imagined interaction with God or prayer, which those of us who are of faith would envision as a dialogue.
Right.
If this conflict management function also showed up in our dialogue with God. So we specifically wanted to look and see if conflict management showed up, but we also wanted to examine, because we were including the full range of Christians and Jewish believers, or worshiping Jewish individuals, we also wanted to look and see if the presence of what Christians traditionally call the Old Testament,
right,
the Hebrew Bible, if the presence of the Tanakh in the lives of the people who were answering our survey impacted or had an influence at all on whether or not whether or not there were these similarities between their prayer styles and approaches and imagined interactions.
Yeah.
So
Can you talk a little bit more about that? What led to that decision to include that as something you were examining for?
Well, so first of all, we thought, well, this would be really interesting.
Of course,
right?
Sure.
Like this would just be a
Absolutely.
really interesting addition, right? Because one, it was, since we were including sample of both Christian and Jewish worshipers, the inclusion of the Hebrew Bible became a unifying text source for both groups.
Makes sense.
So we thought, hey, this may also be a point in which we can that would be an interesting inclusion aspect for us and for the study. So I ended up creating a pretty simple semantic differential scale that evaluated the presence and frequency of the Hebrew Bible in the life who who participated in our experiment. And so and it ended up having a pretty high reliability. So we're, nice that's a nice little contribution from, hey, we got a high reliability scale out of this as well. So, hey, that's a pretty nice little addition to our to the contributions of this study.
Absolutely. So, you did a lot of expansion of Honeycutt and Eidenmueller's work, do, as you said, some beyond evangelical Protestantism, some other Christian traditions, Jewish participants. So tell me, what did that expansion reveal about the diversity of prayer as a communicative act across faith contexts?
Yeah, so that's really interesting. What we observed
Hmm.
was that Ida Mueller and Honeycutt were correct in their hypothesizing that that particular slice of evangelicals would most would have the most similarities between their prayer styles and imagined interactions. Because
Interesting.
when the we finished the experiment and the survey, and the results came back out, that group of people had the highest crossover or the highest
Hmm.
connection, right? Because we
Hmm.
obviously included them in. We didn't
Sure.
only test others, right?
Understood.
And so we really confirmed what Heidenmuller and Honeycutt told us, so that at least among that group of individuals, there were a lot of similarities. The
Mhm.
farther we moved, and what was interesting was the farther we moved in either direction, either toward more liturgical rote
Yeah.
um, styles of prayer or towards more free, non constrained, spontaneous forms of prayer,
Huh.
both directions, it seemed they moved a little farther and a little farther. The similarities
Huh.
had less significance, less strength, which we thought was really interesting. That
Yeah.
both the more structured it was and the more spontaneous it was, um, moved us farther away from the similarities. So
Yeah.
where it connected seemed to be within a group of people whose prayers were um, spontaneously informed but traditionally constructed.
Wow.
Right, so they
That,
have this
yeah.
format of prayer that they have been
Yeah.
discipled into, or just are so
Yes.
experienced through tradition. They have an established format of prayer that then is like spontaneously informed, right? So it's like, I
Yeah.
know I don't have down exactly what I'm gonna say, but I know about what I'm
You have,
supposed to say,
yes,
right?
absolutely. That really surprises me. I would have probably bet money that the more spontaneous you got, the more it would resemble uh, imagined interactions. Yeah.
I thought that at first too. My background is in Pentecostalism, so
Mhm.
free flowing spontaneous prayer is
Mhm.
what we do. However, if we think about the functions and characteristics of imagined interactions, it all surrounds very specific conversations.
Got it.
So there is a planned element to imagined interactions. There
Sure.
is a purpose in the interaction, right?
Yeah.
So if you are not giving a lot of preemptive or post thought to the interaction, right? Because as a
Hmm.
free flowing spot as a free flowing spontaneously praying person, I'm really not thinking about what I'm praying about next, and I'm not thinking about what I just prayed about.
Huh.
So
Got it.
the proactive, retroactive nature of imagined interactions don't show up in my prayer at all, because I'm just
Right.
going, going,
Got
going,
it.
right?
Wow.
But then it's the same thing with the more liturgical you get, because
Yeah.
those are completely written out, prepared prayers. So I'm not thinking about what I'm about to pray because I'm reading
Mhm.
it.
Right.
And I'm not reflecting all the time on what I just prayed on because I got something more to read.
Right. You're in the moment. You're in the
You,
text of what you're
you're in the
reading.
moment, you're in the text, right? You are either in the moment with the rote or in the moment with the spontaneous, but either
Mm.
way, you're in the moment. You're not giving proactive or retroactive thought.
Got it.
And so
That makes sense.
yeah, so I think that's a big part of what we saw there. And so as a communicative act, um, it does make me wonder uh, about the concerning the value of the different types of prayer that we engage in, right? Not
Mhm.
that one is more valuable
Of
in
course.
any way, but what formative things do the different forms of prayer as we take them? What do they do for us
Hmm.
as
Hmm.
individuals, as members of the community, right? And so I do wonder about that. I wonder about how the way we pray goes into the construction of our own beliefs,
Right.
of our own worldviews, right? The communicative construction of those
Yeah.
things, right? And so I think all of that is leads us. This all leads us to more places down that road.
Absolutely.
Now, what I really all what we also found really interesting was that people who in the semantic differential scale concerning um, their interaction with the Old Testament.
Hmm. Hmm.
The people who had higher who responded saying that they were more frequently engaging with
Hmm.
the Old Testament also scored higher on conflict maintenance.
Wow.
So
That does make sense, to
yeah,
me,
so
like
the more
intuitively.
so
Yeah.
the more they were exposed to the Old Testament, the better they were at conflict maintenance,
Huh.
which was really interesting. And then I'm sorry, I'm pulling up the paper now because I wanted to make sure that I
Please.
got this right, because there were a couple of really fascinating things that we saw here that I want to
Yes.
make sure and hit. Um, no, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Let me back up. I said that incorrectly.
Okay.
Okay, I said that incorrectly. We checked for conflict maintenance, and
Right.
it did not show significance on conflict maintenance.
Okay. Yep.
What it showed significance on was relationship maintenance.
I see. Okay.
So the higher you were exposed, or the more frequently you're exposed, the higher the exposure to the Old Testament, and this is the way that we've been framing it, the better you love God and others.
Huh. Wow.
They scored higher on the relationship or the relational maintenance function of imagined interactions. So we thought that was very interesting, considering from a Christian perspective, Jesus said, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. Love your
Right.
neighbor as yourself. In both of these is all the laws and the prophets, right?
Right.
So when Jesus when Jesus says love God, love your neighbor are the two highest forms of expression of Christian faith, and that is all found in the Old Testament, and then
Right.
we test for exposure to the Old Testament, and people who score higher in exposure to the Old Testament do a better job of loving God and loving others. That was pretty cool for us.
That's got some really strong interdisciplinary salience, I think. I mean, that's something that is going to be a useful finding well outside the academy.
Yeah, yeah, we thought so. We were actually very excited about that. I was hoping that conflict maintenance would pop someplace, but it unfortunately it didn't.
Right.
But that just happens, right? Sometimes
Right.
when you're running these
Absolutely.
experiments, some of these get significant, some don't. Right, which is why not all of our hypotheses were supported.
Well, I
Uh,
think I think that's a good sign,
yeah,
for your study.
yeah.
It seems to me that, when not all hypotheses are confirmed, to me that lends credibility to
Yeah,
the
well, I think
study.
it I think it at least showed that we were asking imaginative questions.
Mhm. Absolutely.
And so yeah, um it was a lot of fun to walk through this process and see what the data showed us, as well as to talk about the potential implications, both in communication theory, but also in very applied ways for people of faith.
Sure, absolutely. So, what led you to include conflict with God as an experimental prime?
Well, in a very self-centered way, I was in a conflict
Well,
class
sure.
when I came
Yep.
up with this, right? Right. But we didn't have to keep that. We could have pulled it
Right.
out. For me, so as the author that was driving this study, um, I think that one, it made sense to include conflict because we were expanding to include Jewish worshipers, that then led us to also look at the presence of the Hebrew Bible, then understanding one of the beautiful, in my opinion, one of the beautiful models that the Hebrew Bible, that the Old Testament provides for us, is multiple examples of people in conflict with God,
Yes.
right? Whether it's Abraham, whether it's Moses, whether it's David, right? Like we have multiple examples of people arguing with God, wrestling with God, pushing back on God, telling God about how much God has ruined their lives or let them down or not showed up for them, and how long, oh Lord,
Mhm.
and we don't get a whole lot of that in Christian scriptures,
Right. Right.
um,
Yes.
outside of Jesus on the cross saying, God, why have you forsaken me? Which is a pretty significant example.
Hmm.
We don't get a whole lot of that, but we
Hmm.
do get it more. And so for us, it was like, okay, this is a reality of faith life.
Hmm.
So, and Imagine Interactions is this very special form of intrapersonal prayer or intrapersonal communication in which um, we are we are interacting with ourselves while also believe it by faith interacting with another,
Right.
that in any relationship, in any form of interaction with another, there may be conflict.
Hmm.
So let's look at it. Let's look at
Yeah.
conflict. Let's look at whether or not this helps significantly, right?
Hmm.
And so we wanted, and because Ina Mueller and Honeycutt had pulled conflict out of their 2010 because they didn't anticipate that it would do much, we were like, let's stick it back in,
Absolutely.
and so see
Absolutely.
see what it does.
Yep. Did you
Um,
find anything that surprised you about how participants process conflict through prayer?
so I think that when we look back at some of the ways that it well, so let me first say, like statistically, we didn't find much real significance around conflict from a statistical
Hmm.
point of view.
Hmm.
It was interesting, however, when we looked back at how some of the participants responded to the prompts,
Hmm.
because the way that we constructed this experiment was it was in right experimental groups in which
Hmm.
some received a prompt, some received a conflict prompt, some received an anti-conflict prompt. Like,
Sure.
so for some it was like, can you tell us about a time in which God really made you angry, let you down, blah
Yeah.
blah blah blah. Can you tell? And then for others it was like, can you tell us about a time in which you felt loved by God, that. And for others it was like, tell to us about your favorite color, right? Like,
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
so looking back at um the prompt around, can you tell us about times in which you've been angry, upset with God, there were some people who didn't know how to answer that question.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, and by that, I don't mean they gave us bad responses. I mean, they literally wrote, I'm not sure how to answer this
Sure.
question.
Yes.
Uh,
Yeah.
and and I thought that was interesting because if we had a significant number of those, I would have added an
Yeah.
RQ, and we would have been off,
Right.
again, doing some sort of analysis with those responses. Um, but just thinking, imaginatively about it, is or were they unable to answer that question because that's not something they've ever given thought to, that's not
Mhm.
something they've ever been encouraged to give thought to,
Yeah,
that's something that they would actually feel uh disquieted by or off
right,
put or upset, right? Like, you hold on, I'm never supposed to be in conflict with God.
right.
I'm always just supposed to be like, why should I ever be mad at God, or whatever.
Mhm.
um and so why is it they were unable, and what were the reasons they were unable? That would be, I think that would be an interesting continuation of the study, or second study, to come
Yeah.
back and look at. But it did surprise me. In retrospect, it probably shouldn't have, but it did surprise me a little bit that there were people who just were like,
Who
I
had
don't know
no
how to answer.
context
I
for.
don't know how to. I don't know how to answer this.
Yeah. Just to reiterate something you said before and make sure I got it correct, you had said before there was not a correlation between exposure to the Hebrew Bible and
Conflict.
conflict.
There was
Yeah.
a correlation between
Oh, there was,
exposure and relationship,
but not conflict.
but not
Yeah.
conflict.
Yeah, that's surprising when
Yeah,
yeah, I would
our thought was that you would be better at conflict
yeah,
if you were exposed to ways in which,
to
through your
expose the
faith.
models of conflict uh, between people trying to follow the God of Abraham and experiencing conflict with him.
Yeah,
I
that
think
that was our thought, and it just wasn't significant.
that
There
is
was, yeah.
really really interesting, huh? So thinking about so you guys look at all 14 of those characteristics and functions of imagined interaction and
Hmm.
how they relate to prayer. In Mueller and Honeycutt had not looked at all
Correct.
14 of them. Um, did anything, as you added back those that they did not study, did anything stick out? In of those that you added back in as being significantly present
As
in
far
prayer?
as significantly present, no. Like, to
Mhm.
be quite honest,
Yeah.
I mean, we did quite a number of statistical analyses on these, uh, including an ANOVA, and t-tests, to look at all of the different ways these characteristics and functions may show up. And honestly, the most profound thing I think that we learned uh, was that Ida Mueller and Honeycutt were pretty right on, with their suspicions in 2010 concerning who and where.
Yeah. But now we know for real. Like now, but yeah, I mean, they had a suspicion that
You're
would be
right.
true. Now we can demonstrate, that
Yes,
that's
yes.
the case.
Yeah,
So
and
I
there's
mean,
some
that's
great theorizing that can be done on that too now, right? Because,
absolutely, yeah,
and
unquestionably.
it would have been nice. I will say that, um, we did, um, we this was so one of the things that people often wonder, especially when it comes to quantitative research from a university setting, is, was this like a Sona pool of students? And no, it wasn't.
Hmm.
Like we went out, and I think we used Prolific to get adults,
Yeah.
right? So
Yes.
these so the and not that college students aren't adults, right?
Right.
But our sample size,
This wasn't a
um
convenient sample of
it
14.
wasn't
You went
just
out
this
and
convenient sample. Yes, we went out and got them for this study. So we, feel pretty confident about the application of the sample onto the population,
yeah.
because of that.
Yep. Absolutely. I mean, we learn things when we detect factors, and we learn things when factors are not present, with people. I mean, they're both knowledge, that we're
Yes.
that we're finding. So Absolutely. So it sounds like you just recently had a move to a new institution, but can you
Yes, I
tell us a
did.
little bit about what you're currently working on or where your research is headed next?
Yeah, thank you for asking. So a couple of things that I think may be of interest to this group
Hmm.
that I'm working on is I do have an article in R&R that I'm hoping will be fully accepted by the end of the year, in which
Hmm.
I did a case study of sexual abuse at 7 universities in Texas
Oh,
that all
wow.
took place within a campus ministry.
Okay. Oh, wow. Yes.
So,
Absolutely of
so
interest.
looking at, yeah, so looking at what were the systems and structures that existed within the local chapter context,
Hmm.
but then also within the affiliated denomination
Yes.
that allowed for this prolonged. There was a registered sex offender who had a decade's worth of access.
Yes.
So what happened there, right?
Yeah.
What existed within the systems and structures of the local and
Hmm.
the national that allowed a decade's worth of access, right?
Yes.
So that's a piece that I continue to work on that I'm hoping will be fully accepted by the end of this year.
Hmm.
And so I've also got some work, one that is under review right now, in which a co-author and I looked at the role of religious faith identity
Hmm.
um,
Hmm.
among wellness influencers.
Okay. All right.
So people who through social media build themselves as um, whether yeah, I mean, when we say wellness influencers, we're talking about people who are like eat this way,
Yeah,
work out this way, exercise this way, include these nutrients, and nearly every one of those times they're also selling products, right?
of course.
And so we looked at. I think we ended up looking at something like 48 different influencers that each had at least 10,000 followers on Instagram and also
Hmm.
identified their faith in their bio, right?
Yeah.
So we did a fantasy themes analysis of 2 months worth of their posts on Instagram.
Hmm.
So that's something that's also within this faith realm.
Yes.
I also will say that I'm preparing once I got enough data from the case study on sexual abuse that um, there is enough there to do another study. And that's been an extraordinarily emotionally disruptive study,
I'm
to be
sure.
quite honest, right? It
Of
has
course.
taken years to do this study, in part because you can only read victim statements so long before
Yes.
it's poisons your soul and you've got to walk away.
Absolutely.
But we did observe in the data um, uh, instances, multiple, in which people did speak up and speak out, and the organization was deaf to
Hmm. Hmm.
their to the advocacy.
Hmm.
So we are going to be exploring what does that look like here.
Mm.
What does this inability or unwillingness for the institution to hear um, the moral the moral complaints of their members.
Yeah.
What is that?
Yeah.
Where is that coming from? So that's some of the research that I'm in the process of doing, and I've got on the horizon. I know I'm going to be, I don't know when this will ultimately post, but like I've got several presentations both at RCA and
Cool.
NCA, so people can feel free to come and listen and participate and
Absolutely.
love for as much interaction as possible at RCA and NCA this year. So
Have you
so
been
yeah.
before to
Oh
RCA?
yeah, yeah,
Good.
yeah. I've been went several times while I was a student at Oklahoma. So it'll be my first time, however, at both as a real faculty member.
Ah,
So
yes.
So I'm looking forward to that, and looking
Oh,
forward to presenting and being with the great peeps here in RCA and at NCA.
terrific. All right. Well, welcome everybody. It's so good to have you here. We're talking today to Dr. Ryan Beaty, who is, if I'm not mistaken, with the University of Oklahoma. Is that
I,
right?
I was with the University of Oklahoma when I conducted the study we're going to talk about today.